What I wrote isn't very good this time, and I wrote it a while ago, so it's not so, I guess, like in my mind in this way. But that's not really the point. Like, the point of these videos is mostly just to essentially prompt me so you can like see my thinking, and then also like the way I think, or that sort of thing, and that's what the point of videos or any kind of online content is ultimately. Really, it isn't so much it's not so much the content itself which is valuable. It's like the elucidation of another person's character, and maybe that isn't necessarily like strictly going into, like, I guess, I don't know, laboring your idiosyncrasies or anything like this. It's mostly just like getting into someone else's head. That's what the point of these videos are. Even if it's just to myself, I think I'm still the only person that actually watches these at all. But anyways, I'll start. Communication isn't inhibited by an inability to communicate something which is necessary. Which, what I mean by this is, like, something has to be said. Like, if you're communicating with someone, there's generally some things which have to be said, because they're relevant to you, or because the other person needs to hear it. And it would be dishonest for you not to tell them that you're thinking that. You're essentially hiding something. You are being deceptive in some kind of way. You are pretending. That's what inhibits communication. Not always, but we'll continue. Communication between two parties who are capable of comprehending the same language should, in theory, be able to continue indefinitely if unobstructed, because conversation by its nature is a mechanical process without end. If this isn't possible, it is because the sensation of the inability to communicate has made it impossible. This occurs for a number of reasons. First is a misjudgment of the other party's understanding of what is being said. One person will say something under the impression they are being understood, only to realize as communication continues that they aren't, and subsequently they cease to be able to communicate, being unable to tell if they are being understood. So what I'm saying here is essentially, like, if either party is giving a false impression, either lying that they can understand or lying that they can't, deception, or essentially like hiding of one's character, is what inhibits communication, because there are infinite topics of conversation, and so communication should be infinite, theoretically, or it should be able to continue without end. It should be able to keep going forever. At its root, this is an issue of deception, as the second party gives a false impression, and as such, every subsequent impression is considered with frustration and suspicion. Other similar issues of deception or outright lying also give rise to similar problems. And yes, it's a deception, I guess, at the end of the day, which inhibits communication, and also, I guess, freezes communication, because, mechanically you can speak without any important information or anything that actually needs to be said, anything that is necessary to be said being said. And so the communication is just totally without purpose. It serves nobody. This is possible even in a case of deception, but the communication is actually like pointless. At this level, communication completely breaks down and becomes an exercise of one party attempting to interpret secondary signals or the implied psychological motivations for the other person's behavior. And what has to be said cannot be said. Yes. Another reason for the inability to communicate is that what is relevant can't be said without endangering the relationship of the communication more broadly. Essentially, if one party reacts badly, I guess, and then just decides like to stop talking or leave or whatever. Like they get upset, but that sort of goes without saying. Differences in values or negative opinions on the second party, which if addressed would result in an angry or destructive reaction, must remain suppressed to an extent. This is true for all communication. However, in many cases, the emotional relevance of these subjects to the parties in question will force the discussion, and if left unresolved, will create the sensation of incomplete or avoidant communication, which leaves both parties unsatisfied. Contemporarily, the vast majority of discussion occurs in these modes, and less avoidant and subsequently more satisfying discussions are exceptionally uncommon. This is because the rules of social life prohibit the discussion of personal satisfaction and paths to finding it, which is to say, the concern which is most relevant to people. And yes, essentially this is the point, right? The actual thing that is what needs to be said in any discussion, really, like at its foundation. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Like this is relevant to everything. The question of personal satisfaction is like a foundational question for pretty much all behavior. It's not something which you can avoid. It has to come up at some point. But every conversation which people have essentially skirts around this discussion. It just skirts around this topic. No one ever actually addresses it. And so for everyone, essentially, the whole social framework is just based around avoiding this. And like really, I guess social life just becomes hell. It becomes essentially punishment for anyone who isn't willing to engage in lying to themselves or lying about how they feel or lying about this or that or whatever. Anyone honest or anyone who doesn't understand, I guess, the point of lying or can see like the consequences of lying and is willing to like essentially actually address the problem head on, you're punished for that. And I think ultimately, like, this is not eternally true for all human beings in all of history or for all time. Not even close, really. This is a specifically modern phenomenon. It should be said that the deferring of satisfaction of human drives, which is called a career and comprises the bulk of people's time and effort, relegates personal satisfaction to a secondary component of life and is therefore inherently unsatisfying. Additionally, unemployed life tends to be similarly painful as ambition, which is to say, the manifesting of human drives outside of a career is, for the most part, a functional absurdity, being blocked by bureaucracy and potentially financial obstructions. It would in theory be possible to derive satisfaction out of one's career, given they are working according to their psychological drives. However, due to social pressures beyond the scope of this essay, human drives are now anathema, and every career has become functionally busy work, avoidant and unattendant to all human elements. As such, pure busy work without purpose or relevance is all that's left. Yeah, so I cut the video there just because I tried to give an explanation for this and it was long-winded and going off topic. But like with this, I guess like just the transformation of all sort of civic life into something which is totally unsatisfying and pointless. I think what you're seeing is really a sort of self-fulfilling cycle, in the sense that like this kind of feeling of dissatisfaction, it just sort of leads back into itself. Like, I'm not satisfied, therefore things have to change and we have to push like or we have to, I guess, adhere more to these kind of insane ideals which are killing us. It's because we're essentially not adhering enough to like these insane ideals, the left-wing project in general, that we're failing. That's what's happened. I mean, that's what's been happening, I guess, rather, at least this century, and then, for the better part of the previous century as well. And this is very broad. This isn't just, like, the left-wing project is not just, progressivism or anything like that. It's quite a bit larger. But I don't have time for that. But you get the general idea of what I'm saying here. It's essentially a political idea, or an idea about human nature, which has like ingrained itself into I guess, the civilization, or rather the governments which run it, and has like been forced upon us, or has been forced upon people during their enculturation, and they sort of neurotically come back to it over and over again, and like destroy themselves, like adhering to this very anti-human system of life, or of like mundane life, or anything like that, just anything quotidian. Due to this, life is at best extremely difficult and stressful, albeit satisfying, and in the true majority of cases, totally unsatisfying and without any realistic path toward a better life. Feelings of depression, anxiety, or other generalized displeasure with a source which cannot be readily identified are in almost every single case the result of this kind of desultory existence, and the associated feelings of powerlessness and impotence. This is all, in its origin, an inability to satisfy human drives in some totalizing way. It is, yeah. It's lying about your nature. It's like the inability to accumulate power, or the inability to sort of like do what you know you really should be doing, because it is generally like pretty easily understood at a very visceral level, like what is necessary and what is good, but we can't. For a party afflicted by this sensation, and by that I mean the majority of people to some extent, avoiding the discussion of this sensation puts you terminally in a state of incomplete communication. This is why depressed people often talk about feeling misunderstood or alone even when around others. Discussion is light and avoids the only subject which is relevant to them. Communication has become impossible. Often people like this only ever had a weak attachment to social life and life more broadly, and once they enter this state, unable to communicate with anyone, they become totally untethered, beyond the reach of desire, ambition, will to power broadly, or even simple human intimacy. I said will to power. Whatever. You get the general idea here. Once communication is impossible, it's very, very easy for this kind of very existential pain to completely take over, and you feel like you're going over a cliff. You feel like you're essentially unable to hold on to anything, or like stop yourself descending into just like absolute endless misery. And I think that this is really a function of current social life. And I think that people who, I guess, try to adhere to normalcy, or they try to adhere to some like broad view of like normal social life, like, oh, this is how you should act, this is like the correct way of living, this is the straight and narrow. They are completely in over their heads at this point. Like, it's very obvious that what was the straight and narrow is essentially a historical anomaly created out of like very specific circumstances, which were like economic, historical, and really had nothing to do with any like desire of the individual to succeed or anything like this. It's just like ultimately a ridiculous notion. Civic society is just falling apart at this point. Everything is like coming apart at the seams, and I don't expect this to like turn around anytime soon. But that's almost irrelevant, because I feel like a lot of people kind of understand this at this point, or at least they're beginning to get it. What I think needs to be acknowledged and allowed for before anything else, before any positive improvement can come, is that, like, yes, things are bad and things are probably going to get worse, but also, like, things are bad specifically for intelligent people, for people who have had the ability to see this and who have been socially isolated because of it and abused because of it. Intelligent people are the people who maintain and propagate society. Intelligent people are the ones who like maintain the quality of life because they essentially create civilization, and without them, like, everything goes into decline, and there isn't really like there is no way to, I guess, like, salvage anything, because everything becomes there is no like broader ambition or vision. There is no like unification of people. There is no like higher kind of goal or anything like this, and it just becomes a competition for resources, which no one wins in the end. So it should be very obvious, I guess, that there is no way to move forward until we acknowledge, like, the level of cruelty which has been inflicted on these people, and which has been in large part due to normal social life, normal people, that everyone has essentially been involved in heaping the funeral pyre, so to speak, and like just sadistic anti-civilizational tendencies, really the destruction of the entire world, inadvertently, like unthinkingly, until everyone can acknowledge that they've been doing this. Like, how can we possibly move forward? How can there possibly be a way to progress? It doesn't even make sense, What is the solution? The solution is, oh, if we just keep abusing these people, keep putting them through unnecessary suffering and hardship, somehow things are going to turn around. That, I think, is still like what a lot of people believe, even if they think that like things are getting worse and they're beginning to see it, until the root cause is addressed, until like inequality of intellect, inequality of human, like the inequality of human beings is allowed for and cultivated, really. Like, what could we do even? It just doesn't, yeah. I don't know, I guess people just don't register that. And for me, I should probably say, because I'm talking about intelligent people in the abstract here, am I talking about myself? I don't know. I've never really had very much luck. I've never been able to prove my intelligence to anybody. These videos are an attempt for this. I've generally scored quite low on IQ tests in like my academic career, in really any kind of measure for intelligence. I've failed pretty abysmally. So I can't say, I really can't say that I'm even talking about myself here. In all likelihood, I'm a slightly above average intelligence person who has, because of a poor, stunted enculturation, because of that, I have essentially like been forced into an even lower intelligence bracket than what I am capable of. that's the impression I get. I get the same impression from a lot of people around me, although I have to say most people I've ever met have been quite stupid. That's not an exaggeration to say that I'm the most intelligent person I've met, which is not so much to me like something to brag about so much as it is something to lament. I feel very, very isolated from the people around me, and I always have. That's, I guess, the way I feel. Just to like make it clear who I am. That seems relevant here, anyways. Um,